Hello everybody, welcome to the first installment of Online Robotics for Choice Academy. I'm excited to be here. I'm in my basement, so I'm not excited to be in my basement in particular, but I'm excited to be hanging out with you guys, at least virtually, for the coming time. So we're going to be using what's called a virtual robot to do some of our programming with. It's the programming environment we were getting ready to start right before we left for the shutdown. So let's get to it. So to get to this environment, you're going to open up a browser. I like to use Google, and you're going to do vr.vex.com. So this is the programming environment like I said, we're getting ready to use. Normally what we do in the classroom is we'd create a program and then we would test on the robot to see how it works. Well, we can't do that with here. So what we'll do is we've got a virtual playground to mess with. So this is a robot that they've created for us that will do its thing based on the code that we give it. So when we click on the playground button, this little window pops up. We can expand this window, make it large or small depending on the size of your screen you're working with. There's a bunch of different playgrounds to mess with. You can kind of take a look at what those are. Today we're going to be using Art Canvas. Over the next coming weeks, we'll be using other different backgrounds to test our robot out on. Now, let me show you around a little bit. We've talked about the shrink, expand button. There's a hide button in case this is in the way of you doing programming. You can hide it, program, and then show it again. There's a list of activities here. If you want to do those, feel free. They're fun. They're interesting. If you get into this, go ahead and knock yourself out. But I'll be providing you with activities as we go along for you to do for class. This heads-up display here with all this information on the robot, this can be turned on or off with this button, on or off. It comes preset to be on. I'm just going to leave it on. It doesn't hurt anything. If your screen is really small, maybe off is better so it maximizes the screen. There are two camera views. One is an overhead view, which is right here, and the other is a right behind the robot view. So this is the robot that's going to be rolling around the screen for us doing our code. The last two buttons I'll show you are a reset button that brings it back to its starting position, and a play button which actually then runs the code. So speaking of which, let's get to it. So before we get too far, let's go ahead and name our project. So right up here at the top, we're going to click here and we're going to call this our name. So I'm going to put Haza, you're going to put your name, and the week assignment that we're doing. And today's assignment is called Dance Off. So I'll say Haza Dance Off is mine. And I'm going to hit rename, all ready to go. So let's start programming some stuff. So unlike the Legos where we programmed horizontally across the screen, this one goes vertically. It's easier to work with, I think, and it also makes more sense logically when you're messing with stuff. So I think it's going to be a way better or way more fun programming environment to be part of. So let's make our robot do something. So let's just grab a drive forward block. So these blue blocks are going to control the movement of the robot. So we're going to do a drive forward for 200 millimeters. Now that 200 may look like a big distance, but a millimeter is super small. So 200 millimeters, that's about 8 inches. So yay-ish. So don't worry about it. These numbers are going to get big. So let's change this actually to 400. And let's come over here and just hit play. See what happens. Awesome. The robot drives forward for 400 millimeters. That's what it does. It did what you told it to do. So let's see if we want to put it back. I'm going to change this forward to reverse. I'm going to hit stop to stop the previous program, hit play to play this one. And sure enough, the robot rolls backwards. Awesome. Easy enough. So the other commands that we're going to be using today are turn rights and turn lefts. So you can have a turn right here, or you can make it a turn left. You can change the number of degrees by whatever you want. Let's call it, I don't know, 160 degrees. And let's see what this does. I'll stop the previous program. And this time I'm going to reset it. That'll bring the robot back to its initial starting point. And then just hit play. So it's going to drive in reverse for 400 millimeters, and then turn left for 60 degrees. And that's just what it did. It drove backwards and then turned left. All right. So that's the gist of testing out your code on with the robot. Let's get to actually building today's code, which is the dance off. I'm going to build an example dance off for you, and then you can take that idea and just kind of go nuts with it and do whatever you want. Right away, I like to do is set the drive velocity. So right now, it naturally sets it 50% speed. We're going to change that to 100 and change the turn velocity to 100. There's no reason to watch a slow robot when it can have it a little faster. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the pin. So this robot has a built-in pin, right? And you can see a little gray line right there. It marks the location of the robot as it moves around. If the pin is down, it's marking. If the pin is up, it's not marking. So we're going to put this command on here to say, hey, move the robot pin down. And we're going to set the robot pin color to some other color. I'm going to call it red. You can do whatever you'd like. All right. So now let's build in a loop. So the idea of this dance is going to last 30 seconds. So we want to create a loop that's going to keep looping over and over again until 30 seconds hits, and then it's going to stop the loop. So to do that, we're going to use a repeat until block. It's right down here in the control blocks. Notice the C shape of it. Any blocks that you put on the inside will get looped around, and they'll get repeated during the loop. These blocks up here won't be used again. So it'll start from the top and work its way down. When it hits here, it'll just repeat these blocks. Now to make it last for just 30 seconds, we're going to come down and grab a greater than block. Notice how this hole in the block, it needs to be filled, and it can only be filled with a 6-sided one. It can't be filled with one of these rounded edge ones. It's got to be with these other pointy edge ones. So I'm going to hold it here until I see that white shine, and it's going to snap right in place. You'll hear it click. And then in there, I'm going to put a sensor, which is a timer in seconds. So the robot has a timer. And notice I'm holding it up. I'm just moving it around until I get a nice white circle around there. Then it snaps in place. So this is going to say, repeat the code that's inside this block. Keep repeating it until the timer is greater than 50 seconds. We don't need 50. We only need 30. So let's change it to 30 seconds. Awesome. And then after it's done with the 30 seconds, we want the whole thing to stop, right? We just want to stop. So I'm going to come up here and grab it and grab a stop driving block and put it after. Not inside like this, but after. So it's going to come down here, repeat this, and then stop driving when 30 seconds hits. All right, now all of our dance party has to happen inside this loop. That's what's going to keep doing it over and over again. So let's get to it. Let's do some driving. So let's start by, I don't know, driving forward. Let's say, I'm going to say 150. You know what? I'm going to say something smaller. I'm going to say 75 because that's a really small number. I don't know why. I'm just going to do it that way. So I'm going to drive forward a little bit, and then let's make the robot turn to the right, maybe 45 degrees. Right? And then, so now it drove forward, turned right. Let's make it go forward a little bit, and then turn, and then go back, and then repeat that. So let's go turn right 45 degrees. I don't know. And then let's drive forward for, I don't know, 75 millimeters. I'm just going to try something. And then, oh, but let's make the forward, let's make this reverse. So we went forward, turned right, reverse, and then now let's just see how that works. We'll hit play and it'll run through the code. Oh, that's interesting. So we just made a little snowflake there. And notice how it's, the green is showing you what block it's running every second, and it's just going to keep repeating this loop until the timer is greater than 30 seconds. And then it's going to stop. There, stopped. So that's 30 seconds. After at the 30-second mark, it came down here and hit the stop driving. So boom, we're good. So that's interesting, but not terribly interesting. So let's play this a little bit. Now I noticed that to get it to go all the way around, it had to go like 8 times. So one of the things I could do is build in another loop. I want to have this repeat and actually draw one of these little snowflake patterns. But I only need it to repeat like 8 times. So I'm going to grab a repeat number block here that says 10, repeat 10. Bring it over here and drop it in so it's around all of them. You can just move it around until you see it kind of holding on to all of them. And then I'm going to change that 10 to an 8. And now if I run it, it's going to run around this 8 times, draw a snowflake, and then it's going to leave this loop, hit the bottom of this loop, and then come back up here and keep doing it for 30 seconds. So what I've done so far actually hasn't changed anything. But watch what I can do now. After it draws one snowflake, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to say, let's turn, so after the snowflake, but before this, but still inside this overall repeat loop, right? I'm going to say turn left 120 degrees. And then I'm going to say drive forward 200 millimeters. I'll leave it that way, 200 millimeters. And then at that point, it'll repeat back up and then do another snowflake, hopefully. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to reset it back to 0 and hit play. Awesome. So that's what it did. It made a snowflake. It wrote over a second snowflake over the first one. So the 120 degrees wasn't a good number. I might try to do like, I don't know, 103 degrees. And then one thing I noticed too is it's drawing these lines in between, which is kind of cool, but maybe I don't want those in between lines. So what I want to do is before it turned here, I could move the pen like right here before it made this motion. I could bring the pen up, and then after it did this motion, I could bring the pen down. And then maybe I'd want to put change the pen color up here so my oh, that's not a good place for it actually. If I put it there, it's going to always be that color, so I'm going to delete that block. And one thing you do to delete block, if you right click on a block, you can delete, disable, or duplicate the block. So duplicate means to create a new one. And then maybe I'm going to throw, I don't know, throw a color here. You can play with it. I'm going to put it to green and see what that does. And then stop and let's see what happens. Oh, reset, sorry, and play. And there it is. That's our dance for today. I hope you enjoyed dancing with me. You need to do whatever you want to do. Change this around, mess with it, completely change the form, look at some of the other things. One of the things you might want to take a look at, there's a random number here. So you can have it choose a random number between 1 and 10. So maybe your degrees, instead of being a certain number, can be a different number. And it can move around kind of weird. Same thing with your distances. Just set a top and bottom for you want that to be. Play around with random numbers, and just have a good time with it. If you want to use my overall formula, like, man, I just want to get this done, you know, you can knock it out and you can just change these numbers around and make it a little bit different. That's fine too. But I think if you find that if you change even a few things, a small amount, you get a really different outcome. So have a great time. Play around with it. The next video will show you how to submit your final product into Teams. So before you watch that, just kind of get your own dance program together. Have a great one, my friends. It's good to be around. Well, it's good to, you know, talk at you to a video recording. What are these things called? Cameras. That's what they're called. Have a great one. Bye.